Hello, my name is Stella Lovelady. My major is conflict analysis and resolution with a concentration in peace building. I will be your host for today's Aircast. Our sponsor today is Democracy on Air, a nonpartisan nonprofit that supports the U.S. on air network of 50 government and election hubs. Our featured guest today is Todd Gillette, chair of Democracy on Air. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you, Stella. Appreciate being here and getting to meet with you all.
So, our first question for you is what inspired you to start Democracy on Air?
So a number of years ago, I was interested in a few topics in regarding politics, and you know, I guess at the time I was in Virginia, and I certainly was interested in national politics, but I realized that there were also a lot of important things going on at the state level. And it kind of was a challenge to find the information that was relevant. And there's some coverage and there's some good coverage, but uh, there's not as much coverage or attention, I think, at those levels where there's kind of the greatest opportunity for people to get engaged and have an impact. And so, when Scott, Joy, and I were talking about working together on this Air Networks idea, and I thought I think we could use that to curate information, to get people to come together, to have discussions and everything. And so that was kind of the brief story of how it came about. But ultimately, it really was fundamentally this. Not that there aren't organizations operating in this area, but there definitely was a gap, and I thought an opportunity to work. And of course, over time, when we came up with the idea of getting interns, like yourselves, it's like, this is a great opportunity to experiment and develop and start to figure out what can work. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation. Tammy, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah. So are you aware of the Congress Day at George Mason that Democracy on Air is planning this semester?
I absolutely am. Yep.
Yeah. What do you think Congress Day at George Mason this semester can accomplish? And do you see it as a model for how students in other universities can launch a Students on Air chapter and start curating their states on air hubs?
Yes, I think it's a great opportunity for that. There's a number of things that this I think can accomplish. At the base level, there's certainly been events generally of the sort where people from Congress come to campus and talk, and that's every time that happens, I think that's really helpful both for the community to understand, but also for students to get a better understanding, not just of specific issues, but how their representatives think and approach issues is important. Um, but in addition to that, we're going to have this opportunity to not just listen to them and ask questions and to meet with staff, but also to see kind of the whole ecosystem in terms of what's going on with Congress and what's going on at George Mason, and with organizations in the community that are focused on specific issues and also democratic engagement. And so, that's where I think Democracy on Air has an opportunity to be, uh, you could say the glue, but also, a way to help people and particularly students gain an understanding of what's around and how, because I think particularly I think your generation is understanding this better than prior generations, but I think it's always been the case that you do your best work when you find the thing that interests you and engages you. um, the role, the topic, right? And so where we give an opportunity, a platform essentially for people to discover opportunities and potentially even spearhead something new, I think that's where we have the greatest potential. And so I very much see Congress Day as, that is in a sense kind of the highest goal, and even more so if this is very successful, that if that then can be done and expanded to other universities and other chapters, then that would be amazing.
Thank you.
Yunya, do you have a question?
Oh, what do you think of democracy on Earth's efforts to expand beyond the US in the coming years?
Thanks, Eugenia. That is it. I'm very hopeful. I mean, ultimately, I think it can, should, and will happen. It's hard to envision what it actually will ultimately look like, just because both the governments and societies in different countries are, of course, very different. So, uh, you know, it's hard. I can't really predict what will happen, but it is very exciting because there's a lot of opportunity. And I also like the idea of seeing if what shape does that expansion take? How similar, how much is taken and borrowed from one success to another, and how much do the individuals and organizations in another country take the concept and change it and adapt it to their particular needs. So that's something that I'm very excited and interested to see how it goes.
Thank you.
Ruby, do you have a question?
Yeah. So, how do you think students can get more engaged in their local, state, and national democracies?
Yeah, that's sort of an evergreen question.
Yeah.
I like referencing back to Congress Day. I am very hopeful that people will, through that and Democracy on Air's efforts, beyond, find opportunities. And so much of it, really has to do with finding a topic, but also sometimes really people that you feel like you can work with, but really having that knowledge, just, I guess, being oriented, right? Because you can come into this space, and I think so many people, right? One of the biggest challenges, I think, for people is really know how it all works, or maybe I know what I learned in high school civics class or whatever, but a lot of people I don't think feel comfortable. I was very fortunate in high school to be involved in a program where we actually went to meet on Capitol Hill with our representatives in a group. And so, I don't recall ever asking a question, but just like seeing how this works and who a legislative aide and legislative assistants are, and how they respond to people who are coming to express their interests and their viewpoints, and then actually getting feedback on what they appreciate, and what kind of impact, recognizing it's not like, oh, I want this policy and great, there it goes. It's right. It's but to get oriented in how the shape of politics from micro to macro really works. And so I guess to me the biggest thing is just start, right? Just do something, find a group, find some people who are interested, find resources. And so whether it's letter writing or email writing or phone calling or going to a discussion or going to a protest, or there's so many opportunities. So I think I've kind of gone rambling a bit here. Hopefully I've answered your question to some degree.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Dalgun, do you have another question?
Yes. Okay. I'd like to ask, Todd, what do you think is unique about democracy on air that other similar or organizations do? Because promoting democracy is a pretty common issue point, right? So what do you think is unique about this?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really good and really a critical question, and it's one that over the last several years, we've been thinking about and trying to, because you don't want to come into a space and try to do something that other groups are doing, and you know, mostly just you don't want to duplicate efforts, and particularly when you're going to get funding, you really need to be doing something um, impactful, right, meaningful. So I really think that, first of all, I mean, one thing that we're really working towards is bringing people together. We're bringing the technology into the picture to foster discussions. We're creating a platform where information that is it's out there, but it's not necessarily easy to find and pull together to create kind of a synthesized knowledge base that makes it a lot easier to get familiar with the topic, whether it's one you're really interested in or one that you find out, is you may not really have an interest, but it's important, it's impactful, and you find that out, or maybe you find a new opportunity. So, that's a big part of it. And I guess the other thing is with the platform, we have an opportunity through, and this is where I think that you all as interns come in to, you're curating, you're kind of following with some of the things that we've been doing, but also experimenting. So I do see our effort also is experimentation is, central, because look, there are a lot of organizations doing great work, but there's always a lot more work to do, and there's always a challenge. So the question is always there. Well, what else could we try that could be more effective? And so, that's certainly, like I said, I think that's central, and I think that's where all of you are really a critical piece. So yeah, so in some sense, right? So that goes and explains a lot of what makes us unique, but also shows that our uniqueness is also in the future, right? There's more to come that we don't yet know what it is that we'll be doing, right? That will define us, because it's an ongoing effort.
Absolutely. Thank you. Does anyone happen to have any last questions before we wrap up? All right. Thank you so much for the answers.
Well, thank you for the great questions. It was really wonderful to see you all, and we'll get another chance before long.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really great to learn more about you, because Scott talks about you a lot. It's great to finally meet you.
You too, Camilla. Yeah, I do wish I could be on more, and there are times in which it gets a little bit easier, but yeah, a lot going on. But I will always am looking to see if I can clear my schedule a little bit better.
I think now we're gonna transition to the news portion of the Aircast.
Okay, I'm gonna go attend my meeting for work, but we'll see you guys soon.
Bye, Ruby.
Have a good spring break.
Bye. You too.
Bye.
Florida is the fastest growing state in the nation. We are #1 in economic growth amongst large states. Florida has more people employed today than before the pandemic. We rank #1 in the nation in tourism, and we just experienced yet another record-breaking year for
I think
visitors
so.
to the Sunshine State.
I've like
We are
seen
#1 in
parts
law
of
enforcement
it, but I didn't
recruitment
see the
and
final
support.
product, so
Florida's crime
probably a
rate
good idea
stands
if we
at a
all go and
50-year
watch
low.
it.
We are number We rank #1 in the nation for education freedom. We rank #1 in the nation for parental involvement in education. We rank #1 in 4th grade reading and math amongst all large states, and we have the #1 public higher education system in the country. And maybe most famously, we rank #1 for protections of our citizens against the biomedical security state, from prohibiting jab or job mandates to banning vaccine passports to ensuring hospital visitation rights.
That was a lot. I don't know, has everyone gotten to see this? Do you think it'd be better if we okay. Well, why don't we, once it finishes playing, can you pause and then, we can all watch it and then we can restart, just so that it,
Donald Trump, hush money, and a potential indictment that could be coming soon. The New York Times is reporting that the district attorney's office here in Manhattan is signaling Trump will likely face criminal charges over hush money payments to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Correspondent is Paula Reed. She's following this story for us this morning in Washington. Good morning to you. The DA is giving Trump the chance to testify. Do you think he'll take it?
I do not, Don. We know that his lawyers have recently met with the district attorney, and they're concerned because we're seeing this uptick in activity in this investigation. This probe has been going on for about 5 years, but in recent weeks, we've suddenly seen this parade of high-profile witnesses, close associates of the former president, like Kellyanne Conway and Hope Hicks, going to testify before this grand jury. I do not think it is likely that the former president will join that parade of witnesses going before the grand jury. In a statement last night, a spokesperson for the former president dismissed this whole thing as, quote, insane.
Okay.
But
I've
the fact
seen all
that
the
the
news part
invitation
now
has
because I'd
been
already seen.
extended
I skipped through
signals that
the
this
parts I'd already
investigation is
seen, but
likely wrapping up and that an indictment is possible. He's pretty arguably fixated on former President Trump being charged, and any good defense attorney would seize on that and the fact that he is a convicted liar to try to undermine his credibility.
So
And
it's
you
just going to
really
be the
need
three
a
of us
credible
talking
witness
about the news.
to support a case like this. So the larger
Okay,
question is, well,
cool.
why is the district attorney digging back into this now? We know that he's under a lot of political pressure. It's
I
always
think it's
possible
funny
that they
that
have
since
unearthed
I put up
some
a map
additional
behind
evidence,
me,
but
even though
based
I
on
don't
what
literally
we know
have the
now,
background,
this
I
is
kind
not
of
the
have the background.
strongest case that
I
the
didn't
former
do that
president
on
is
purpose.
possibly
I just
facing as compared to
finally
something
put
like
up
down
that
in Georgia,
poster,
where they're looking into
and then I
his
was like,
efforts to
whoa.
interfere with the election outcome there. You have multiple witnesses, you have recordings, you have documents, something like that, even though former president's attorneys will admit they're much more concerned
Isn't
about.
it the thing about to end? Because I would turn around and start doing that, but
This was a big national stage for the governor. There's been speculation about a possible run for the White House from him, but one of his political advisors told the Washington Post this was not about him. It was about his work getting national attention.
Look at me. I am a transgender man. Do you really think that the girls in my high school would feel comfortable sharing a restroom with me?
What's most important is that we try very hard to accommodate students. That's why I have said many times, we just need extra bathrooms in schools. We need gender-neutral bathrooms, and so people can use a bathroom that they in fact are comfortable with. I think sports are very clear, and I don't think it's controversial. I don't think that biological boys should be playing sports with biological girls.
all right. Definitely a lot of news this week. I guess it all kind of centers around culture war things. Well, especially both the DeSantis clip and the Youngkin clips center around culture war issues. What were y'all's initial thoughts listening to these potential presidential hopefuls' thoughts on culture war and their states? They're also interestingly both governors.
Yeah, so I think it's very I'm sorry for any background noise. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, from the news clips that we saw that, it seems like they both have a lot of support, and going forward, I think there's going to be a lot of contention, especially surrounding their statements and their viewpoints for sure.
Do you have anything to add, Dagu?
Yeah, well, I think this whole culture war thing, I think it's like it's very much what do I say? It's a unifying point, I think, for a lot of people on the conservative side, I think, to say like that they are on this side of the culture war and that they're on the other side. So I think when Ron DeSantis performs these sort of acts, and I do think that there are performances it is very much uh, for having people rally around him, sort of like that unifying point. And I think for Youngkin, it's very much the same way as well. When they do these things, people can identify them as someone on their side, right? So I think, yeah, it is very much trying to prepare for their presidential campaigns.
I absolutely agree with that. And I do think what's interesting about both Youngkin and DeSantis is they are both well spoken. They both speak in persuasive manners, which is pretty different than Trump's style of speaking. Even though they both would like to tap into Trump's base in order to win an election, if they do end up running for president, they definitely are presenting themselves in very different ways. And also, for the other news clip that we saw, like Trump's potentially being indicted, Trump's entire political existence has been filled with constant scandal. And DeSantis and Youngkin, at least to my knowledge, neither of them have faced such great scandals. Neither of them are being indicted currently. So they definitely are trying to distinguish themselves while still siding on the conservative side of the culture war that in some ways Trump really started to fuel.
Yeah, I agree that that they want to try to distinguish themselves from Trump, but when you mentioned the number of scandals, I think that Trump's scandals actually even made him more popular almost with the people that supported him because it was like as I said, like another point to which people can distinguish themselves. Oh, like you believe that Joe Biden's election or election to presidency was valid. Well, I disagree. That's another point of contention, right? Um, and but I do agree that they want to distinguish themselves. I think I read something that even people who voted for Trump twice in the presidential elections still this time around they have very little hope that Trump can actually win another election. So I think by trying to distinguish themselves, they're also trying to capture those voters who have maybe become disillusioned with Trump's campaign over the years. And Camila, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting point that you made. Because I personally thought that because of that kind of cult of personality around Trump, that it would be very hard for those conservative voters to overcome that and look at other candidates as potential options. But upon learning that information, I do think it's a good strategy that they are trying to distinguish themselves from Trump and give voters like more options as opposed to what was presented in the past.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with both of you. And there was always a portion of the conservative base that did not support Trump and that's like begrudgingly voted for him. The kind of more traditional conservatives. And I think both Youngkin and DeSantis are trying to bridge that gap where they're trying to win back the more traditional conservatives that maybe still voted for Trump, voted for Trump saying, well, I'm voting for him for economic reasons. I'm voting for him because I don't want to vote for a Democrat, but I don't really support him, and didn't vote for him in primaries. But they also don't want to lose Trump voters. They're trying to bring together those two sides by still engaging in the culture war. So to gain those Trump voters, but then trying to present themselves as more respectable, well-spoken people that aren't that don't have so many scandals, to win back the more traditional conservatives that did not like seeing Trump rise to power.
Right. And also, I think like something that distinguishes these very like traditional conservatives as opposed to the MAGA wave, I suppose, is that I think Trump's ideology, I suppose, his campaign was very much anti-status quo, while I think these traditional conservatives distinguish themselves by being pro-status quo, trying to return to the original roots of the Conservative Party. I think that's one major contention that I think that they're trying to pull the conservative, the Republican Party back towards and away from Trump and away from the anti-status quo ideology that he promoted. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Stella, I think you brought this up, but yeah, it just reminds me a lot of like the Lincoln Project that went underway a few years ago, with supporting, I'm not sure if they actually supported Biden instead of Trump, but they were trying to move away from that like Trump image in conservative politics.
Yeah, I remember that. It was definitely the anti-Trump conservative perspective. I guess we haven't touched that much on Trump's indictment, but we still don't really know what's going to happen there. And what's interesting about Trump's indictment is that even if he were charged and sentenced, there's nothing in the Constitution preventing someone from running for president and becoming president, even if they have a felony record. And I actually do think that that's a good thing, right? Especially in a world where we have a justice system that isn't always just. I don't think that people that maybe were arrested for protesting or arrested for many things should potentially not be able to run for federal offices. But I wonder whether facing criminal charges would harm Trump's campaign, or if, like, I'm sure in the eyes of some of his supporters, it would like even further justify them because they just think that Trump's being targeted. But what are y'all's thoughts?
Go ahead.
Oh, do you want to go first, Dilgun? Or yeah, I agree with you, Stella. There is definitely the possibility of the charges both hurting and helping his support. I think we've seen in the past that Trump may be like charged, or people are like working to like bring charges against him, or the whole thing with him getting impeached a few years ago, and how none of those things kind of went anywhere. So I'm curious to see if this will actually, as it is stated in the news, and actually like lead to him getting sentenced at all.
Yeah, sorry about the background noise. But I personally think that it just further increases his support with the core of with the Trump supporters. I think with the Trump supporters, they see that that the government itself is corrupt and the system is against Trump, and that Trump is there to dismantle the system and build something new that has a more populist base. And so when they see something like this that is based in the government system, such as the impeachment process or these indictments, I personally think that it just means that these supporters see that that their worldview is confirmed, that the system is out to get them, the system is built against Trump. So I think it further lends support to him.
As the impeachment process or these indictments. I personally think that it just means that these supporters.
Scott, do you mind?
Scott?
Do you have anything to add, Scott?
No, you can close. I was testing whether you don't want to have people who don't have their video on to be able to enter, Delgood.
Oh.
So you want to. There's a way to hide.
Okay, you're hidden now.
Yeah. So I just wanted to. That's why I came in.
Okay.
Just in case somebody does that you already in advance keep them out of the video.
Yes.
Yeah, that went well.
Okay,